بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الحمد لله. My dear respected viewers, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah today we will continue our lesson in Mantiq. Because last week we completed our Muqaddimat of Imam Sanusi, where I conducted the class in Malay. And before we enter into the other books of Imam Sanusi, one of the important aspects for us to cover is the knowledge of Mantiq. So I remembered the last time, I think a few months back, I started Sullam al-Munawwaraq every Wednesday, and I have not completed the explanations. So that is the reason I felt that I will forward it to today. That is every Tuesday after Zohar prayers, inshallah ta'ala. I plan to finish up this book of Sullam al-Munawwaraq, and then we will continue from where we stop it, inshallah ta'ala. So for those who want to follow this class, all the lessons, the previous lessons have been recorded. You in the Masjid Khalid YouTube, you can go to the playlist and you can find all the lessons, and I think altogether we have 17 lessons. So we will continue from there, inshallah ta'ala. And likewise in our Facebook also, we have those recorded lessons, inshallah. So the topic of today is Faslun fit Tanaqud. This is what we will cover, inshallah ta'ala. The translation, basically I made some translation in the Facebook posting. So for those of you who are new to Mantiq, I can understand it's going to be might a bit tough for you. Just give me a second. Because there are certain things that one has to know when it comes to where we are now. So what I will do, I will just do some revision before we continue. So we are in the chapter of Al-Qadaya. The bigger chapter is the chapter of Qadaya, and the chapter of Qadaya basically it refers to propositions. Propositions. So proposition is basically a sentence where you can apply whether it is true or or false. So a simple proposition, we say Zaid is standing. Zaid is standing. This is a proposition that consists of the subject and the predicate. So in Arabic we have this mubtada and khabar. So this is an example of a proposition. So before this we spoke about the different types of proposition. What we are concerned in the knowledge and Mantiq, if the proposition is a universal one. If the proposition is a universal one. So we have for example qadaya shakhsiyya, and we have qadaya muhmala, and then we have the sur. We have the sur. So when we mention, for example, Zaid is standing, we say this is qadiyya shakhsiyya, because it refers to a particular person by the name of Zaid. By the name of Zaid. So we ascribe standing to Zaid, and we say Zaid is standing. And then we have what is called as qadiyya muhmala. Qadiyya muhmala, where the subject of the proposition carries a universal meaning. So for example, we say al-insan. We say the word al-insan. Al-insan, we say this is muhmala. Why? Because there is no what you call it, this kayf, and we call it kayf. We do not have the all and some. So whenever you have any propositions that is begun by all, or proposition that is begun by some, in Arabic we call it kul and ba'd. So this becomes musawwara. But if a proposition carries a universal meaning, for example, we say al insanu fi khusr, all human beings is in a state of loss. So al insan it refers to all human beings, but it doesn't have the al kul and ba'd. So we say this is muhmala. So muhmala yani is a universal any sentence, but it is not any begun any by this word any of all or ba'd. Anyway, we term any as the universals and the particulars. And then we have universal any statements and that is begun any by either by all or begun by some. So for example, we say some any humans any are writers. Some any humans are writers. All any humans are intellectual. All any humans any are intellectual. So here we have for example, we use the word all, and then we also use the word some, and then we have the positive and the negative, where we say, for example, not all any humans any can write. Not all any humans any can write. And we say some any humans can write, or some any humans cannot write. So we have the negative. So altogether we have the 8 factions, and all these things we covered in the chapter of Tanaqud. So under the Musawwar, or we say under the Surah, we have the 8 factions, and we can divide them positive and negative statements, and likewise the all and the some, the all and the some, the cave. So we have 8, and then we have the muhmala, a universal statement, that's what we mentioned, that is not begun by any of this, whether it is all or some. And then we have the shakhsiyya refers to a particular thing. So these are some of the propositions that were discussed by the author. So he goes on to speak about tanaqud. Tanaqud basically in the Arabic language it means a contradiction. It means a contradiction. But of course, when what you call it in terms in logic or in Mantiq, we are speaking about taking the opposite meaning of a proposition, taking the opposite meaning of a proposition. So this is what we meant by tanaqud. And if you have a proposition, how can you attain the opposite of that proposition? So basically, this particular chapter is telling us how we are going to do so. So the author begin by saying tanaqudun khulful qadiyatayn fi kayfin wa sidqu wahidin amrun qufi. So the author began by speaking about the definition of tanaqud. Author here goes back to Al-Imam Al-Akhdari, the author of Sullam. So here we are basically using the book Sullam for those who first time following. This is the Sullam Munawraq of Al-Imam Al-Akhdari. I translated, I gave a brief translation of this, but I do not have time to put it on screen, but I place it on the Facebook page. So he mentioned that tanaqud, when you have this term tanaqud in Mantiq, it means khulful qadiyatain. There is the different in the opposite meaning of two propositions. So now you have two propositions. So let me give you a simple example. I use two proposition. Number one, I say Zaid is standing. Number two, I said Zaid is not standing. Zaid is standing. Number one, I say Zaid is standing. Number two, I say Zaid is not standing. So these are contradictory, correct or not? These are contradictory. So it cannot be that both of them are correct. Zaid cannot stand and not stand at the same time. This is tanaqud. This is impossible. So either one must be correct. Either Zaid is standing, or Zaid is not standing. So this is basically what the author is saying. Khulful qadiyatain, there is an opposite, there is a difference in two propositions, opposite meanings. Fi kayfin. Kayf goes back to positive or negative. So for example, I say Zaid is standing is a positive sentence. Zaid is standing is positive sentence. Zaid is not standing is a negative sentence. In Arabic, we call it mujaba. This is qadiyya, shakhsiyya, mujaba. Zaid is standing. Zaidun qa'imun. The other sentence is Zaidun laysa biqa'im. Zaid is not standing. We call it the salbiyya. Qadiyya, shakhsiyya saliba. So we have the term mujiba and saliba. Mujiba is a positive sentence, saliba is a negative sentence. Zaid is shakhs, this is shakhsiyya, this is a proposition and it speaks about a particular thing or a particular person, and we ascribe the ruling to it that he is standing and not any standing. The second one is not standing, not this is what we call as kayf. Kayf it goes back to the whether it is positive or negative. So if you have such contradictions, only one must be correct. This is what the author mentioned was sidqu wahidin amrun qufi. Only one of them must be true. It cannot be both, because there are contradictions unless we change the subject to another person. So for example, I say Zaid is standing, Hassan is not standing. There is no problem. But if the subject is the same, we are speaking about the same person. Now the same person cannot do these two actions at the same time. So this is basically how we analyze opposite propositions. Then he mentioned فَإِن تَكُنْ شَخْصِيَّةً. Then he mentioned if the proposition is shakhsiyya, that's what we give the example of Zaid. أو muhmala, it is a universal proposition that the subject is universal and it is not preceded by all or some. We call it in the surah. So if it is shakhsiyya or it is muhmala, the author is saying, how do we get the opposites of propositions that is shakhsiyya, propositions that is muhmala? He says, فَنَقْضُهَا بِالْكَيْفِ أَن تُبَدِّلَ. So it's easy in a sense that you just change the positive and the negative. So for example, earlier we started off by speaking about Zaid, which is shakhsiyya. So we say Zaid is standing. How do we get the opposite of Zaid is standing? We add a negative particle to it. We say Zaid is not standing. So this is for shakhsiyya. So for example, when it comes to muhmala, for example, we use the word al-insan. So we do not say kullul insan or ba'dul insan. So if you just use word insan is lafz kulli, and it carries universal meaning, and it is not preceded by all or some. So this is called muhmala. If it is preceded by all or some, it is not muhmala. It is musawwara. Those who study Mantiq in the Arabic language, all these terms must be in our mind. So if a person asks what is the difference between muhmala and musawwara, so the answer will be that all these are propositions that carry universal meaning, that the subject is universal, but the difference is that when we speak about muhmala, it is not consist of all or some, but when it comes to musawwara, it consists of all or some. So for example, an example of muhmala, we say al-insanu hayawan. Al-insanu hayawan, human beings, al-insan, what you call it, living beings. Humans are living beings, hayawan are living beings. So this is qadiyya muhmala. So how do we get the opposite? We get the opposite by adding the negative particle. We say laisa al-insanu hayawan. So the first proposition is al-insanu hayawan. The second proposition is laisa al-insanu hayawanan. That what you call it, human beings are not humans are not living beings. So this is certainly the opposite of the first. So as what we mentioned, that only one must be correct, because these are contradictories. Both things cannot be true at the same time. So the author speaks about shakhsiyya, qadiyya shakhsiyya, and qadiyya muhmala. Qadiyya shakhsiyya and qadiyya muhmala. If you have qadiyya shakhsiyya and qadiyya muhmala, how do you get the opposite? By bringing the negative particle, by negating. That's how you get the opposite. So we have completed these two. Then he goes on to speak about the musawwara. So the first thing we have to understand what is the meaning of musawwara. So again, when we speak about musawwara, we are speaking about universal propositions. Universal propositions that have the all or some. that have any the all or some. So just now when we mentioned any, for example, al insanu hayawan. So if I add any all, I say kullul insani hayawan. That all any human beings, all humans any are beings. Or if I add any ba'd, I say ba'dul insan hayawan. Some any humans any are beings. And then any we have any the mujiba and saliba. When we say kullul insan hayawan, this is a positive statement. But when we say, for example, laisa kullul insani hayawan, this is a negative any statement. Just like any when you use any the ba'd. Ba'dul insan hayawan, this is a positive statement. Laisa ba'dul insan hayawan, this is a negative any statement. Now, so now any the author any is going any to speak any about the musawwara. Qadaya musawwara. So he said, wa in takun mahsuratan bisuri. Sur, and we have any this all any or ba'd. All any or some. Kull or ba'd. Fanqud bididdi suriha al-madhkur. Fanqud bididdi suriha al-madhkur. So if the sentence any is begin any with all, then we take any the opposite any by bringing some. We take any the opposite any by bringing any some. So let me what you call it give you any some give any some any examples. طيب. For example, we say kullu insan hayawan. Earlier yani I mentioned this is musawwara. Kullu insan hayawan, that all any humans are living any beings. So how any we get any the opposite any will be laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan. Laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan. So when we bring any the negative any particle, we also yani bring the particular, because any to make the universal, take any the opposite any of the universal, we bring the particular, and also we bring the negative any particle. So when we say al insanu hayawan, then the opposite any will be laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan. Laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan. What is any the meaning laisa ba'dul insan any hayawan? Maybe any I will let me see. Usually any I will just write down. Just give me a minute. Inshallah any I will illustrate any something. Okay. So for example, earlier we mentioned kullu insan hayawan. So now we have this kullu. This is what we meant by sur. And then we have any insan. This is what you call it, a universal word that consists of many individuals under it. So we say this is what you call it, musawwara mujiba. So we say this is mujiba, meaning positive. This is a positive sentence. So how do we take the opposite of this? we say laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan. So this is what the author yani mentioned, yani you take any the opposite. So you change the positive sentence and it becomes any negative sentence. This is how any we get any the contradiction. We take any the positive sentence and we make it into a negative sentence, and then we change the kul to ba'd. Can you see this? We change any the kul and into ba'd. So in English any we say all humans any are beings. All humans are living beings. Now any we say not some humans are beings. Not some humans are beings. Let me explain now. Or in another way, and we say some humans are not beings. Some humans are not. Some humans are not beings. So this is the opposite. So when we say kullu insan hayawan, all humans are beings. So when a person says some humans are not beings, now this is certainly what you call it, the opposite. This is there is a contradiction. So how can some humans are not any beings when we say all humans are beings? So this is what the author earlier he mentioned. He say wa in takun mahsuratan bisuri. If the sentence is sentence that is musawwar, there is a sur, as what we mentioned just now, kullu insan hayawan fanqud bididdi surihal madhkur. Fanqud bisurihal madhkur. So you get the contradiction by changing the opposite of that sur. So he say fa in takun mujibatan kulliyan naqiduha salibatan juz'iyya. This is basically the example earlier I mentioned. So let us go back into this. So he said fa in takun mujibatan kulliyah. This is mujiba kulliyah. This sentence mujiba kulliyah. Mujiba kulliyah. Why mujiba kulliyah? Because this is a positive sentence. This is a positive sentence. Whereas laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan, this is saliba juz'iyya. This is a negative sentence and is saliba, negative, and this is juz'iyya, a particular, because we use the word ba'd. We use the word ba'd. So it is juz'iyya. So notice this. What are we changing here? We are changing the mujiba becomes saliba, the kulliya becomes juz'iyya, because the kulliya here, this is the kulliya. We use the word kul. Kullu insan hayawan. Like in English, we say all. So like in English, we say all humans are beings. This is what we meant by mujiba kulliya. Mujiba kulliya. So mujiba, it is the positive sentence, and kulliya, it is, we say all. We use this word that encompasses everything. Whereas when we use some, this is juz'iyya, this particular. So I change the all becomes some, and the positive becomes any negative. So this is mujiba kulliya, this is saliba juz'iyya, or juz'iyya saliba, no problem. Juz'iyya saliba. So now if you look at the matan, this one he said fa in takun mujibatan kulliya. Mujibatan kulliya. Example is all humans are beings. Naqiduha, yani the opposite is salibatun juz'iyya. So salibatun juz'iyya, the example we gave. Not all humans are beings. Not all humans are beings. Wa in takun salibatan kulliyah. Wa in takun salibatan kulliyah فنقيضها موجبة جزئية. So يعني if it is a negative any sentence, it is a negative sentence and followed any by kulliya, and followed any by the all, then the opposite and it will be a positive sentence and followed by the some. طيب يعني now يعني we what you call it, how يعني do we understand, how do we understand any the second part. So earlier yani we mentioned kullu insan hayawan, and if we say this is mujiba yani kulliya, mujiba kulliya. And then yani we have laisa ba'dul insan bihayawan. This is juz'iyya yani saliba. So we get yani the opposite yani of kulliya mujiba by bringing yani saliba juz'iyya. This is yani what we mentioned. And then when we have saliba kulliya, for example yani we say kullul insan laysa bikatib, kullul insan laysa bikatib, yani not all yani humans are writers. So the opposite yani will be mujiba juz'iyya, yani ba'dul insan katibun, ba'dul insan katibun, yani some yani humans are, some humans yani are writers. So this is yani the opposite yani of the first. Let me get what you call it, a better example any for me to illustrate. Just give me a moment. I will get some many examples. Okay. Okay, we get any this example. We have let's see, I cannot paste. لا شيء من الإنسان بفرس. Okay, we will take any this example. لا شيء من الإنسان بفرس. So this is qadaya kulliya saliba. Kulliya saliba. What is any kulliya yani saliba? La shay'a min al-insani bi farasid. Yani nothing any from humans any are horse. La shay'a min al-insan bi farasid. So we say that humans yani are not horses. Humans are not horses at all. Maybe I use any this translation at all to explain any la shay'a. So this is any we have any this surah where it is kulliya. Yani it consists any of all any human beings. So we say all human beings any are not any horses. How we get any the opposite any of the sentence? So we get any the opposite any by mujiba yani juz'iyya. We get any by what you call it, mujiba juz'iyya. What is any the mujiba yani juz'iyya? We say ba'dul insan farasun. Ba'dul insan farasun. So if I write any, for example, ba'dul insan farasun, yani some humans are horses. So this is a contradiction, correct? Not? Because when I say humans are not horses any at all, it consists any of all humans. But I will have a contradiction any if I use any some humans any are horses. So this is any the contradiction. So this is basically any what any the author any is basically saying. Of course any we can analyze any many other sentences any of this nature. So this is where the last part and he mentioned wa in takun salibatan kulliyya daqiduha mujibatun juz'iyya. So if the proposition is saliba kulliyya, just like when we say la shay'a min al-insani bi farasin, this is saliba kulliyya. And then naqiduha mujibatun juz'iyya. The contradiction or the opposite yani is ba'dul insan bi faras. Ba'dul insan farasun. Yani some many humans yani are horses. So these are the two contradictions. So we cannot say any both are correct. Only one of it any is correct any because these are contradictory. So basically this chapter Al-Imam Al-Akhdari is telling us any about how any we identify any contradictions any between any propositions, and how any we identify whether a proposition yani firstly whether it is shakhsiyah or it is muhmala, whether it is universal, and whether it uses any the all or uses any the some or la shay'a. So all these things are the things any that we have any to look out in order for us any to look at propositions and to look whether they are contradicting any with one another or not. And all these things are basically any paving any our understanding of the syllogism. Because before we go into the chapter of qiyas, chapter of syllogism, we have any to understand the nature of propositions. We have to understand whether there is contradiction or there is no contradiction before yani we bind up any our arguments any in the upcoming chapters any in syllogism. Wallahu a'lam bis-shawab. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.